Because I believe very much in culture. I still believe today. Culture is very important for Iran.
What does life look like for a queen who lost her crown but not her strength? Farah Pahlavi, the Empress of Iran, forced into exile since the Islamic Revolution, is one of the most courageous and determined women today. Farah was married into a world of comfort and could have been a prime example of somebody who spent her time complaining and begging to be served by her handmaidens. Rather, she settled for a position with the sole aim of posing as a force that would change the world. But like they say, you cannot please an entire nation. Farah has lived quite a life following her exile from her own country. Join us in this exciting revelation of what Farah Pahlavi's life looks like today. Farah's early life. Farah Diba is a blessed woman who was born on the most beautiful day of autumn on October 14, 1938, in Tehran, Iran, as the only child of Sohrab Diba, an ex-Persian Air Force captain, and his elegant and beautiful wife, Feride Gotbu Diba. Growing up, Farah had always been very close to her father. Unfortunately, he died when she was 10 years old. It was a very tough period for Farah and her mother, and they had to move to a comparatively smaller house. Still, Farah's mother did not relent as she realized she was the backbone her daughter needed. Farah Diba was a brilliant and curious little girl. Little wonder she did exploits as she got older. She attended the Italian school in Tehran, then transferred to the French Jeanne d'Arc school, where she made many friends. Later on, at 16, she transferred to where she completed the rest of her education. Architecture was a course that fascinated her very much. She then decided to take it seriously and make it her major at the École Spéciale d'Architecture in Paris as a student of Albert Besson. She met Mohammad Reza Pahlavi at this school, who would later become her husband. Mohammad was the Shah of Iran, and they got in touch at the Iranian embassy in Paris, where Farah was presented as one of the Iranian students studying abroad. Had she known this relationship would have become romantic, would she have avoided that meeting? Farah had no royal blood, and becoming queen was not one of her goals in life. She was an Iranian woman who got involved with Mohammad Reza and suddenly became the Shabanu of Iran. It was love at first, and the couple announced their engagement on the 23rd of November 1959, and on December 20 of the same year, they got married. At the time, the success of royal marriages depended on the fact that the female who had been married into the royal family needed to produce a male heir to the throne. This was one of the reasons that prompted the dissolution of marriage with the former wife of Mohammed. The Shah, on his own, was extremely anxious because he needed a male heir to his throne to ensure that it was secure. This situation put a lot of pressure on Farah. Imagine the joy that filled their hearts when the princess gave birth to the crown prince, Reza Pahlavi. However, when Farah became the queen, they were initially not quite sure what her role would be. While some believed her primary duty was to produce a male heir who would take up the king's throne once he was no longer around, the case turned out quite differently after the birth of her son. Farah was very good at her job and could do more things after Reza was born. Sometimes, she could attend official events, meet new people, and even start her projects. Everyone knew the affection Farah bore for France. Similarly, France had the same affection for her. So, when she visited France in 1961, she had the opportunity to meet André Malraux, who was directing the cultural life in France at the time. They became great friends, and Farah found it a wonderful idea to introduce the exquisite art of Iran to France and vice versa. With this, she ensured that the museums and galleries in the two countries exchanged artifacts and replicated information sharing. Isn't that a great idea? Over time, Farah began to feel very passionate about helping people and making Iran a better country. She also began to meddle in government affairs, especially in areas where she was interested, such as education, health, or women's issues. Being a queen for Farah did not mean she could just spend time gazing at herself in the mirror. She was dedicated to working, and people surely felt it. One cool thing Farah loved was the arts. She played an important role in establishing the Shiraz Arts Festival. Everyone at the festival danced to the tune of music and enjoyed the theater performances. It was a way of bringing the Iranian arts and Western art together, and it took place annually, usually between 1967 and 1977. But Farah did not simply end with creating the festival. She liked museums and wished there were more of them. So what did she do? She built more museums simply because she was convinced that her citizens needed to have some places to visit and get a background knowledge of their art, history, and culture. And guess what? She could pull all of these things through because she majored in architecture and assisted in designing the most lovely Neavaran royal palace. Farah had a great vision, and that was to ensure Iranian women received a better education. With this vision, she founded Pahlavi University, now known as Shiraz University. It was the first Iranian university patterned after American universities instead of French ones. But Farah did not stop there. She was involved in many other projects, such as creating organizations that cared for children, providing support for the sick, and educating women and girls. Farah worked round the clock every weekday, usually between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m., to help the people through her charities. Can you imagine working 12 hours a day? But Farah didn't mind because she learned to love listening to and helping others. As she worked harder, she would find herself getting noticed by others more than before. Suddenly, she became a superstar in Iran. People had so many expectations of her. She even had a team of 40 people helping her with all the requests people had for her help. Farah also helped the 24 different institutions established in Iran. It was a lot, handling 24 different activities within different projects, but Farah knew how to do it, which is among the reasons the people of Iran also liked her. Farah was a godsend hero to them. Her charitable work did not just stop in the city. She went to the remote part of Iran and extended help to the rural dwellers. After all these great achievements, Farah became the queen in a large formal coronation in 1967, and she was the first of Iran in an incredibly long time. But that's not even a big part of this story. At the time, Farah Pahlavi's husband, the king of Iran, stated that if he were to die, his wife would be the one in charge of Iran. This was a big deal because tradition expected men to lead, especially in workplaces, and for a woman to be promoted to such a high rank was rare. However, the king understood that Farah was intelligent and competent and would deliver her best. And you know what? Farah was very proud to be from Iran, so she reached out to everyone to share the same feeling with her. Farah was a force to be reckoned with. If the narrative portrays Farah as a diligent woman who worked hard to ensure change in Iran, what changed the narrative about her? Well, it was the Iranian Revolution in 1979. If you're wondering how and why it affected her, don't go anywhere, because what we're about to reveal will blow your mind. The war that got Farah exiled. Before you think about anything out of the ordinary that happened in Iran, no, Iran was fine and the economy was booming. The country at the time was developing in every sector, but at some point, this change may have become quite a lot for Iranians to handle. Iran was a highly traditionalized society, and these changes quietly turned it into an industrialized, postmodern, and complex urban one. Some people began to believe that the government was exaggerating its style of governance and provision of social amenities. That wasn't all of it. They perceived the recent upgrade within their system of government as creating a negative office full of corruption and incompetence. It wasn't long before the people started sharing their voices, and in 1978, the citizens began to protest against the government because they did not like the recent status quo. What altered Farah's story that led her to exile? Iranians were annoyed with the imperial government as early as 1978. By the last quarter of that same year, people started making open demonstrations against the monarchy. In her memoir, Farah noted a definite feeling of unrest, and many official engagements were being called off for security reasons. And as years went by, the situation only deteriorated. Police officials used force more often against protesters, and on January 1979, the government declared martial law in all of Iran. The country was in a state of revolution, and Mohammad Reza and Farah were left with no other option than to run away to Iraq on April 16th in 1979. However, the Iranian Revolution had long been cooking behind the scenes as the economic crises, socio-political oppression, and influence of Khomeini stimulated it. Imagine traveling from one location to another because you're in danger. That happened to the Shah of Iran and his wife Farah. They had no other choice but to leave Iran because the new government of the country refused to have them in the country and ordered their unliving as soon as they were sighted. This made them move from one country to another in search of a place they could call home. But it wasn't easy, as most governments did not want them in their country, because they feared offending the new Iranian government. Fortunately, some friends assisted them. Mohammad Reza's friend, the president of Egypt, Anwar Sadat, allowed them to stay in Egypt for a while. They also went to Morocco to meet with King Hassan II, and even went to the Bahamas. However, they moved to Mexico when they could not remain in the Bahamas anymore due to their Bahamian visas expiring. They rented a lovely villa in Cuernavaca, near Mexico City. That is where they resided a little till the summer of 1979. It's 45 years after their exile, and we may wonder what's become of them. How are they living? Well, that's why we are here. Don't go anywhere. How Farah lives today. After they left Egypt, Mohammad Reza got sick with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and this sickness required special medicine and doctors to help him. In light of this situation, they traveled to the United States since he could only obtain the services of the best doctors there. However, traveling to the United States made the revolutionaries in Iran very unhappy. They were already angry at the United States government, which worsened things. This premeditated anger led to the taking of the American embassy in Tehran hostage. With this new development, Mohammad Reza and Farah could not reside in the United States because the government thought it would only worsen their relations with Iran. So they left after having Mohammad Reza's surgery. This time, they went to a beautiful island in Panama called Contadora Island. Farah and Mohammad Reza were a little unhappy as they did not see the United States government assisting them. They had expected much from the government and felt the government did not do enough to protect them. However, as far as their condition was concerned, they were glad at least that they could struggle together and not get killed, or so they thought. But when they realized their stay in Panama was going to be short-lived, because, at the time, rumors had it that the Panamanian government intended to apprehend the Shah and deport him to Iran, they had no other choice but to write again to the then president of Egypt to allow them to return to Egypt. This request was personally made to the First Lady of Egypt, Jahan Sadat. Luckily, they were allowed and returned to Egypt in March 1980. Unfortunately, something unexpected and sad happened that inadvertently cut their stay in Egypt short. Remember, the Shah was sick, and he had just been operated on? Well, after they stayed in Egypt for a while, Mohammad Reza died on July 27, 1980. Was this the end of the journey for his widowed wife? Or was she going to find other ways to cope? We are about to find out. After Mohammad Reza died, Farah stayed in Egypt for 2 complete years, mostly because President Anwar Sadat was kind enough to let Farah and her kids live in Kubay Palace until she finally found her ground. And yes, if you're wondering what living in a palace is like, your imagination is not so far off because it feels like a fairy tale. Farah was in control for a few months after her husband's demise. Then something sad happened. Sadat, the president, died in October 1981. It meant that Farah and her kids had to flee Egypt and look for a new home. Fortunately, President Ronald Reagan in the United States said they could live in America. Farah was extremely grateful. Moving to the United States was the beginning of a fresh start and a new life. She settled in Williamstown, Massachusetts, before buying a house in Greenwich, Connecticut. Over the years, things have changed in Farah's life. The tragic events that occurred in her life did not come to an end. Farah lost her daughter, Princess Layla, in 2001, and this must have been difficult for her. Left with her son and grandkids, she bought a new home in Potomac, Maryland, near Washington, D.C. Now Farah moves between Washington, D.C. and Paris, and every year in July, she returns to Egypt to visit her late husband's tomb at Cairo's Al-Rifa'i Mosque. 2 years later, Farah wrote An Enduring Love, My Life with the Shah, telling about her life with Mohammad Reza. The book quickly became very popular in Europe, and people discussed it everywhere. There were even excerpts of the book in newsweeklies, and Farah was invited to present the book on television and radio. Of course, some people found the book quite intriguing. Publishers Weekly called it a candid, straightforward account, and Washington Post wrote that it was engrossing, which meant that it was fascinating and people could hardly tear their eyes off it. However, not everybody had something good to say about the book. Some held a different view altogether, which is quite normal. But that's not the only thing the Empress has been able to accomplish since her exile. The Empress of Iran, Her Imperial Majesty Farah Pahlavi, was recently awarded the Architect of Peace by the Richard Nixon Foundation. This prestigious award was given to her at a luncheon event held in Washington, D.C. on the 7th of November in the year 2024. Melanie Eisenhower, the granddaughter of President and Mrs. Nixon, who is on the board of directors at the Richard Nixon Foundation, handed over the award to her. This award was presented to her for her immense work advocating for peace, freedom, and human rights, especially in her home country, Iran. She has also spoken for the Iranian people, especially as she tries her best to bring light to the recent struggles Iran is facing today. In light of the recent situation, Farah Pahlavi's later years after her exile were marked with disappointment over the fate of Iran. While speaking to the art newspaper, she questioned what might happen if the revolution did not occur. Many unhappy citizens, poverty, and violation of human rights that have begun to prevail in Iran greatly troubled her. The Empress was most concerned with women, children, the poor, the lack of freedom, and the stifling of creativity. She was also troubled by the increase in the rate of prostitution, the consistent jailing of writers and journalists, and the practice of hanging people for whatever reasons. These violations of children's rights and human rights left her extremely worried.
The majority of people are unhappy and they want change. They want political freedom, they want a better life, they want human rights, women want...
Farah Pahlavi continued to be hopeful in these conditions and stayed optimistic for the young generation of Iran. She had envisioned a different Iran that cherished the Iranian tradition and culture and encouraged liberty, democracy, and rights for all. She believed the young people in Iran wanted to breathe, be free, and lead good lives. Farah Pahlavi has always expressed great love for Iran, and even when she was the Empress, she moved around the country with so much pride, visiting beautiful places and meeting her friendly, endearing people. Farah Pahlavi continued interacting with Iranian artists while she was away from Iran. She would occasionally call them, which made them very happy. "Sometimes I call them, which makes them happy," she said. Some of these artists remained her intimate friends. Their sentiments comforted her. The boys affectionately referred to her as their queen of culture, and in turn, she wore a cloak of pride, knowing she had worked hard for her country to be changed for the better. But Farah Pahlavi had a special affection towards Iranian modernist artists, and she recalled many of them pleasantly years later. "It's difficult to list all the great modernists," she said. "The truth is, there are many of them." Some of the notable artists she mentioned included Tanavoli, Mohasses, Iran Darudi, Monir Farman Farmayan, Charles Hossein Zendaroudi, Faramars Pilaram, Layli Matin Daftari, and Behjat Sadr. These artists, among others, have contributed to the development of modern art in Iran, and Farah Pahlavi is extremely grateful to have walked this path with them. But that's not all. You've heard everything about what the country of Iran was like, and sometimes all you do is ask yourself whether the information you heard is true or false. Farah Pahlavi, once the Queen of Iran, is enthusiastic about telling Iran's story to the world. She teamed up with some filmmakers to tell her life story, and Iran's in both a documentary and scripted drama. Farah Pahlavi has granted the filmmakers the right to narrate her story, and they are under Serendipity Group company with producer John Powers Middleton. They shot scenes for the documentary in Washington, D.C., and plan to continue shooting for the rest of the year. The scripted project is also being processed. Iran has a long and interesting history. It's fun to learn that it used to be the capital of the ancient Persian Empire, which used to be one of the largest empires on Earth. The Persians were master builders who loved sports and games and cherished their culture and the arts. They even developed games like backgammon and chess. Unfortunately, the glory days now belong to Western civilization. But what's the thing I like most about Iran? Yes, you guessed right, the people. They are very and extend a good reception to the people they come across. They are also very patriotic to their country and its culture. Farah Pahlavi is one example, seeing that she loves her country and is even determined to let people know about their history. Many young people and people from the United States don't know about our country, and what they do know is mostly negative, especially with everything that's going on there now. I hope these projects will spark an interest in our country and our civilization by people all over the world, Farah said. These two recent projects have filled the former Queen of Iran, Farah, with excitement as she plans to clear her family's name. She has grown tired of the fabricated rumors being told about them. For example, the fabricated story is that they flew planes laden with jewels and stones out of Iran. She recalls overhearing someone on TV saying a second plane was loaded with treasures, and this genuinely stressed her because the jewels remained at the museum and the banks were shut for years. Fortunately, some friends from Iran contacted her via email to assure her that the jewels were indeed intact. What tends to be forgotten is that Farah Pahlavi lost jewels and thousands of books, photographs, and paintings. Remember, she loves art and has collected some of the most art and cultural items throughout her reign as the queen. That said, she has been privileged to have friends and supporters outside Iran who have now sold and even given her artwork over the years. And today, she has received so many pieces that her children can no longer even take them. This is one of the many reasons she created the Shabanu Farah Pahlavi Foundation in 1976 to house all the artifacts she collected in exile for everyone to enjoy. Farah Pahlavi smiles when she speaks of the Shabanu Farah Pahlavi Foundation, which she founded to study and impart information about Iran. She is still very passionate about this goal, even up to the age of 86, and is still busy with emails, phone calls, and paperwork for the foundation. Although she wakes up tired, she is very happy to remain busy doing something productive most of the time. But despite this tiredness, Farah still thinks about the most impactful thing she would accomplish again before she leaves the face of the earth. Farah Pahlavi also has a pet, which she finds company, Mowgli, a lovely King Charles Spaniel. It was given by her granddaughter Noor, the daughter of Reza Pahlavi, the Crown Prince of Iran, and Yasmin Pahlavi, the Crown Princess of Iran. The story behind Mowgli's name is quite interesting. Surprisingly, Noor also had a dog named Baloo. It was the same breed as the one found in the Jungle Book. Notably, Farah's nickname was Baloo over 60 years ago when she was a cub leader in Iran. However, her daughter Farahnaz suggested the name Mowgli for their new puppy. The name was also after the young hero's name from the same story. And so, Mowgli it was. That's it for Farah Pahlavi's story. Having lived a life full of ups and downs, purpose, passion, and strength, we cannot help but wonder what's next for her. Do you think Farah's legacy will continue to inspire generations to come? Feel free to leave your opinion in the comment section. Remember to give a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. You can also explore the other videos displayed on your screen.